Hi everybody. This week we're going to be working on a shift dress. A shift is just a very basic straight dress with some shaping created with darts. You would see these a lot in cute little summer dresses, after five wear, bridesmaid type dresses. This is a good foundation to start with to design those other types of styles. So we're going to be taking some measurements to create the pieces that you're going to use to drape. So I'll take this off. And you're going to want to measure the length of your dress form from the high point of shoulder, which remember is here where the neck joins the shoulder, and going straight down. What length do we need? So here, this is 20 inches. Remember, you need a little inch up here for some extra space. 20 inches is fine because it doesn't have to go beyond the bottom of the dress form. And then you're going to need some measurements like across the bust from the center front to the side. And this one is 5 inches. But remember, I need an inch at the front to fold under, and I need an inch over on the side to work with. So I started out with a 7-inch piece of fabric, and then you cut it down. You're going to need to know what's called your hip arc. So that is the measurement from the front to the side. This one is like 4 3/4. Add a half an inch or so for ease, and record these numbers. You also want to know from the high point of shoulder to the waist, that's 9 inches. And from the waist to the hip, what is that depth? It's 4 inches. So those are the measurements that you want to record. And we'll be taking and preparing our fabric with those measurements. As long as you're working with that same dress form, I would record all those measurements, and then you have them and you don't have to keep taking them over. So let me get the fabric prepared. So you want to take the first piece that you got ready for your front, and you want to pin it to the center. So I'm pinning at the center. I'm going to come up here to the neck. I'm going to pin at the neck. And I'm going to pin it at the hip. You can pin the bottom if you want to. It isn't really necessary. So I'm going to trim this little bit of fabric off here, right where I had drawn that little neckline. You could have cut it before. You can take this little flap off underneath too. It's not important. And we're going up to the neckline the way we've done before. So you want to cut down and release that so that it can lay nice and flat at the neck. And so I'm just going to go along there at the neckline, and I'm pinning that neckline. There we go. So we've pushed all the fabric into the areas that we want the darts to happen. So I've pinned my neckline. You want to slash the fabric at the waist to where you are having that waistline mark at the hip. And then we're going to smooth this up, going upward just a couple inches. And you're going to mark that part of the seam. So a little different than what we've done with the bodices. So there's my side seam that's above the waist and below the waist. So come across the chest here and pin down your shoulder line. And then you can see you have all this extra fabric here. That's where we want it to be a dart. So it's a side dart. You don't necessarily need to make the dart straight. It has a more slimming look if the dart comes down at an angle. So I'm going to bring this down here. I'm going to pin my dart, and I want to mark where the end of my dart is going to be. It's going to be like right about here. If you can't get the fabric to fold exactly where you want it, don't worry about it, because you're going to true it up in the paper or on the fabric after you take it off, and then on your paper. So you may have to make an adjustment to the dart. I'm just going to pin the end of it like that so I know that it's there. Come up under the arm and pin that. And remember, when we marked the area under the arm, we added wearing ease. So if this is my side seam here, I'm going to just make a dot there, and then a dot to remember that I need to bring the seam out a little bit so we have a little bit of wearing ease. Now, if you're making a dress that's sleeveless, a lot of times you don't add that extra ease here, but we add it in the back so that this lays close to the body. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to come over this way, and we've got a lot of fabric here. We're going to make 2 darts. Our first dart should land on the princess seam, and it shouldn't be more than, like in the center of the dart, you're taking about, maybe like pinching 1/4 of an inch and folding it over. So there's my waist dart. And then you're going to come over 1/2 to 5/8 of an inch. So let me move this pin out of the way. So maybe about 1/2 an inch. So I can take my tape measure if I need to and figure out where that 5/8 is. So it's like right about here. So you're coming over like about that much is where your next dart will be. And we're going to pinch that fabric. So I'm pushing the fabric towards where I want the fold in my dart, because the excess of your dart should go towards the center front. So then I'm going to pin this dart. Lengthwise down here, you don't want them to be much more than an inch and a half long. The farther down you bring them, the more you're going to get like a poked out effect. And we don't want that to happen. We want this to lay smooth. So just put a pin at the end of each dart, and you'll true them up later. If when you take this off the dress form, if the darts look crooked, you're going to straighten them. And then we're going to do the same thing up at the top. I'm going to fold them over. Your dart at the top should not come any higher into the bust area than on half scale, maybe 1/2 an inch, a little bit more. Full scale, it's 1 inch. And so I'm going to just fold these over. This first one should be following the princess line. I'm having a little difficulty with it at small scale. So you want to fold these over, find the end of the dart, fold this over, find the end of the dart, which would be like right about there. You don't want it to be up on the bust, you want it below the bust. And then you want to mark everything. So I've smoothed everything all out. I'm going to mark my neckline. I'm going to mark my shoulder line. Remember, with your armhole, the plate is here, but that would make the fabric roll down. So we want it to be back up, maybe 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to come down around here. Armholes are tricky for most beginners. Sooner or later, you'll, after you've made a lot of clothing and you've seen a lot of armholes and sleeves, it will start to make a little bit more sense. So having removed the fabric beforehand, we don't have a lot of trimming to do here. We can move right on to our back and draping that. So really the only fabric I'm removing right now is at the shoulder and the armhole, because we've taken that time to reduce everything. So I may go ahead and take a little bit here just to get it out of the way. So I'm going to pin that dart in, and I'm just going to kind of roll the front away so that I can drape the back. So I'm just pushing it out of the way, putting a couple pins in to hold it there. Because before I take it off, I want to make sure my hip line and my waistline are matching from front to back. So then we're going to do basically the same thing in the back that we did in the front. So here we are in the back with our piece that we've pre-cut and marked. And I'm going to position this on that center seam and pin it down the center. Oops. I would start at the waist because they have the tendency to be pulled up if you're not careful. So then I'm going to go upward and pin that piece and then pin it down here at the hip or slightly below the hip, somewhere in that area. So I've got the center marked. And then what I'm going to do is pin the hip next. So we're coming over to the hip. I'm going to cut a little bit here at the waist, a little bit at the hip to kind of free it up. And I'm coming over, I'm going to pin my hip. Try to keep that hip not dropping down. You want it to stay on the mark. I cut that a little too far, but it's okay. And then we're smoothing up. So you're not pushing this fabric over because it's not going to go there. It would create a lot of horizontal pulling. So we're leaving that fullness there. And I'm going to bring my side seam up. And you can see I'm not doing it straight. I am letting it curve because there is a curve. So you're pushing a little fabric over. But if you start to see that there's any kind of like pulling effect, then you know you're pulling it too much. So here's my side seam for the hip area. So that's marked. And then we're going to do the same thing at the side. So you have to clip this because you'll see it is opening up and creating a little V. So then I'm going to mark my side seam. So I've pinned that in place. Just a couple inches. You don't have to go all the way to the underarm. And then we're going to do the same thing with the with darts. Up here at the shoulder, you want to bring it around the neck. I'm going to trim some of this fabric away. I'm going to notch it and bring it over to the shoulder. And then at the princess line, some of the excess fabric will go into a teeny tiny dart. It's not more than a 1/4 inch you're folding, and you're folding, I can actually mark if I want where that princess line is. And then I'm going to fold that dart under, and your dart is about 1.5 inches long. So you've made a little dart at the shoulder, pin that in. And then the end of it should be at the princess line. I think I'm going to end it like right about here. And then now we have the place where we're going to take all the extra fabric here and make the 2 darts again.